Hello and welcome back, friends, to House of Props. Today I will be sculpting and casting some dragon scales and then pulling pieces made with foam clay. So let's get started. I'm using oil-based clay to sculpt the scales because once the entire process is finished, the clay can be used for another project. Typically, when I sculpt something for casting, I work on a piece of plexi that has a piece of paper attached to the bottom with an outline of the mold shape. This helps keep my sculpt from growing too large. While I continue, go ahead and click the subscribe and notification buttons so you can see future projects. Or if you're able to, scan this code so you can have this channel on your phone for when you're on the go. Creating casts like this is something I have done in my professional work as well. The most recent case was for a production of She Kills Monsters. The art director wanted to use this demon skull on one of the props, so I sculpted it with Sculpey so we could then bake it and have a rigid base. A mold well was created and we cast the sculpt with smooth-on silicone, which had to sit for hours before we could remove it. Then the mold was filled with foam clay and sat in the freezer for about 2 hours before the clay could be removed. Once the clay air dried, the skulls were attached to either side of an axe and then painted with standard acrylics. I do have to say that this production has been my favorite to work on so far. There were so many pieces that needed to be built and the actors fully embraced every aspect of the design. But anyway, back to the task at hand. Even though some detail will be lost with the foam clay as it dries, I always try and add as much texture detail as possible to my sculpts, just in case there is ever a resin used in the mold. Once I was happy with everything, I hot glued pieces of plexi onto the base to create the walls. You need to make sure you have a tight seal around all the pieces, and hot glue works really well to achieve this. For this project, I'm using this mold maker from Alumilite. It has 2 parts to mix together, and the best thing is you only need equal amounts of each. There isn't any math needed to figure out the right ratio, it's simply 1:1. When you have it thoroughly mixed, you want to pour it into the mold at a spot beside your sculpt and let the liquid rise and cover the pieces. Another great thing about the silicone was that there wasn't any need to let the mix degas like you would with other brands. Since it has a working time of about 8 minutes, I make sure to pour at a steady medium pace because I wanted it to thoroughly coat the pieces and get all the detail without creating air pockets around any of the spiky parts. Now with this silicone, it only took about 30 minutes in order to be able to remove the mold from the walls. With other brands, that wait time could easily be upwards of 8 hours or more. I was careful while removing the walls for 2 reasons. 1, I wanted to keep this plexi to use in future projects, and 2, I didn't want to rip any chunks out of the silicone. Now I just needed to remove the oil-based clay without damaging the mold. With the mold clean, I started to fill the scale negatives with foam clay. I started by pressing clay into the spike part first and then filled in the rest of the scale. You want to make sure that you really push the clay into the mold, that way it will pick up all the detail. When the mold is full, I place it in the freezer for about 2 hours. This helps harden the clay so it can be removed without damaging its shape and detail. The silicone remains flexible, so I wiggle the mold around the scale before pulling the scale free. Now these scales need to sit and dry completely before they can be used for anything. As they come back up to room temperature, they will sweat and become slightly sticky, so be sure to place them somewhere where you won't need to touch them for several hours. And once they are dry, they are ready to use with your costume or whatever your project may be. And the best thing is you can pull many scales from this one mold. I hope you found this video useful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to House of Props for more building content. And remember, if you are building any of my builds or using any of my templates, feel free and tag me at House of Props on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, because I would really like to see your fantastic work. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.